Venerable Robina, who's going to help us unpack our mind, get all the junk out. So.
There you go. Good. Let's do this. Just think we're going to sit there this 1 hour. I'm going to chat away and you're going to listen. I'm going to listen too, I promise. And if there's any advice that we feel we can take, even if it's 1%, go for it, honeys, whatever it is. You can be a 1% Buddhist, no problem. So thinking for this hour, we'll make the most of it, listening, thinking, analyze, internalizing, so we can take away some tools to develop our own amazing potential so that eventually we can help others. The bird needs 2 wings, wisdom and compassion. Okay, sweethearts. So what's on my mind lately? Yeah. Well, one thing is patience. It's an interesting word, patience, We don't like patience. I think patience for us, we actually think it's passive aggression. My feeling is when we think of patience, it's like you're gritting your teeth and waiting for that horrible thing to go away. I think that's what we think of as patience, suppressing, But actually it is like aggression. It's just internalized anger. So that's where it makes us insane. I mean, the kind of patience we think is like that, it's a nightmare. Something will explode one day. That is not patience. That's just not saying the words. Because I think in our culture, we only have 2 modes, either repress and have the nice things come out, but repressing what's happening inside, or vomiting it all out. Well, that was my style. I vomited everything out. I didn't hold anything back. So you can argue there's some sense of something good about that, although it's terrible because I harmed others as well as myself. The Buddhist idea is whatever you think and do, whatever you think and say and do, not just harms others, if it's a negative, it harms you first and foremost. And that's the starting point of practice, is to start to realize that we produce ourselves. And that's something we really take time to think about. So when we understand that the vomiting out can seem like an advantage, because you don't suppress, but at the same time, you harm yourself and you harm others. So at least for you, if you're kind of a quiet person, a nice person, and you don't say the ugly words, at least you're not harming others. So you should be happy about it. But our problem is, in my case and in yours, let's say, if you're a quiet person, neither of us is taking responsibility. I'm vomiting all out and feeling like a victim, but you kind of keep it all inside. And both ways, one is vomiting and one is suppressing. And they seem to be the only choices we feel that we've got, But I mean, the Buddha's expertise, we probably think it was Mr. Freud who started coming up with psychotherapy. Well, I'm sorry, Buddhist is the best psychotherapist you could have, and he's been going on about it for 3,000 years, or 2,500 years. And I'm not even being sarcastic. This is something that's often very surprising to us, that actually when we really get down to the nitty-gritty of being a Buddhist, past all the cliched ideas of walking slowly and being mindful and watching your breath, very cliched, the Buddha's skill, coming from these amazing Indians even before him. They're the ones who unpacked and unraveled the mind. They're the ones who created this technique that the world vaguely knows as mindfulness. These Indians, I always quote, it was, as Dalai Lama says, it was these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago who were the ones who began the investigation to the nature of self. This is really a surprise to us, because when we think Buddhism, we think religion, when we think psychology, we think serious, Freud, Jung, blah, blah, But these amazing Indians, well before the Buddha, they're the ones who created this technique, this brilliant psychological skill that enables you to get your mind to be super focused. So it's a technical skill. Don't think of it as religion. It's not. It's brilliant psychology. And why do you want to get focused mind? So you can see and hear and unpack and unravel the seeming chaos in here, This is the point. And then Buddha diverged in his own direction, in particular in relation to his own experiential findings about the nature of self. But he took with him all the things he'd learned. He didn't chuck it out. He took with him in particular, too, this brilliant skill, this so-called calm abiding, shamatha in Sanskrit, this brilliant psychological skill that enables us to focus the mind to a degree of subtlety and clarity that we don't even posit as possible in modern psychology or neuroscience. So it's brilliant. But even if we don't get anywhere near that, we can begin the process, of doing a bit of practice every morning where we just focus the mind. So in order to see what's going on inside here, not to suppress it, because we think either you vomit it out or you suppress, because we don't. With psychotherapy and with amazing different therapists these days, we are becoming more introspective. We are becoming more conscious of what is going on in our crazy mind. This is marvelous. It's marvelous. But this is Buddha's expertise. And the interesting point is this, in the Buddhist view, that, Let's say we know we're angry, but you're a nice girl, so you don't express it, which is fantastic because you don't harm others. But we don't know quite, you know, and then, or if you're like the kind of person that I am, especially as a kid, I'd vomit it all out, feeling very righteous, you know. So we either vomit or we deny. But what this third one, this Buddha's option, so not expressing what you think and feel does not mean you are suppressing. This is the crucial point. The Buddha's skill is to develop. The Buddha's skill is the Buddha's skill is the ability to really listen really clearly and really closely at ever more subtle levels to the seemingly chaotic, you know, raging conceptual stories in our mind. That's the Buddha, and that's where concentration meditation comes in. It's the skill. Concentration meditation in itself is nothing magic. We often have these really ridiculous concepts of what meditation is. Like concentration meditation, what the world knows vaguely as mindfulness. It isn't a relaxation technique. This is one of the first things to remember. It's not a relaxation technique. This is a major point to understand. There are marvelous relaxation techniques. Yoga has fantastic methods. But this is absolutely, it's like almost the opposite of relaxation. You know, if you're learning to drive a car, you need to relax. It's true, otherwise you go crazy. But you've got to be mainly in the beginning on the alert. You've got to be absolutely conscious, absolutely on the alert every second. The gears now, the left this, the right that, because you're learning. That's the same with our mind. That's the same with meditating. You've got to be on the alert. You've got to be super sharp, super clear. So first of all, this skill, this meditation technique, this skill, it's a training the mind to focus. So, okay, the first thing is it's not a relaxation technique. Second, it is not an alternative to a pill. And this is a major problem because in our culture, I think it's really true. We only go to the therapist when we want to kill our husband or ourselves. We only want to go to the therapist when the wheels are falling off. I can't stress this one enough, and I repeat it all the time. This is the major problem. If we had the ability, using Buddha's skill, this concentration technique, if, you know, a little bit every day, and then from this you bring the skill into your daily life. This is the real benefit of concentration. You know, just to finish, it is not a relaxation technique. It is not an alternative to a pill. And because we only start to meditate when we need the pill, then we want it. Mainly we are using it because we want all the pain to go away. We can't stand the pain of this fight, the drama, the fears, the jealousy, the depression. So we are desperate to get past it. We can't bear the pain. So we think it's an alternative pill. If I meditate, it'll all go away. I mean, this is beyond naive, beyond simplistic, beyond impossible. So it's not to make it all go away. It's not for the thoughts to all stop. It's not to get some kind of vision or special feeling or experience. We're very addicted to the idea that you're going to get an experience. Oh, I had an amazing experience in my meditation today. Well, I mean, who cares? It's not the point. It's not the point. It's a bonus if you did, but it's not the point. The point of concentration is simply that. It's training, like you're training to ride a bike. You're training to do anything. You're learning what to do. So here you're learning to focus your mind on one thing. So why is that difficult? Because the mind is addicted to going everywhere but where it should be. It's all over the place, you know. It's all here and there, involved in all the dramas and the stories. We can't control our minds. And what's interesting in the modern world, I mean, we're so intelligent. We're so educated, you know. We're super educated, we're super brilliant technically, which is why we call them diseases. We call it ODHD, we call it ADD, I've got all the names. We call it bipolar, we call it all these different things. It's just an uncontrolled berserk mind. Well, join the universe, people. What do you think Buddha's on about? He's been on about an uncontrolled mind for 2,500 years with these brilliant skills. We think we've discovered these new things. No, it's not new. But then we're scared of it. We're terrified of our minds because we see we can't control them. We don't know what to do with them. We don't know where they're coming from, all these thoughts. So no wonder we go nuts, you know. So Buddha's skill is the ability we learn to handle and work with and to unpack and unravel and comprehend the seeming chaos, to kind of edit, to make sense of and edit the stuff in there. So one of the first things we have to cultivate is the courage to not be scared of what's in there, because this is part of our nightmare. We can't stand the thoughts. We can't stand the pain, you know. And then the other tragedy is we think it's who I am. We identify with it. I am bipolar. I am insane. I am HDAD, ICOD, whatever they're called. I am this. We paint ourselves with that one brush. And then we're scared of the uncontrolled mind because we don't think you can control it. But the Buddha's skill is that we can. That's the job. That's the brilliant skill that he's cultivated. And not just then control it, but learn to then not just be in charge of it, which means not be afraid of what's there, allowing whatever that comes up and see it for what it is. They're just a bunch of thoughts, basically. It's all just thoughts, conceptual stories, conceptual elaborations. But our tragedy is because they're so habitual, we then believe this is me. So that's why we're scared of it. That's why we wish it all go away. We can't bear the pain. We identify ourselves as that. This is me. And then we don't see all the good bits. We just focus only on the rubbish bits. This we all recognize. We do all this. So anyhow, the point I was trying to get to is the one about patience, what it is. What is patience? So really, patience is quite an advanced practice, actually. I mean, it's only really taught in the more advanced levels of the Mahayana path. It's one of the major practices of the Bodhisattva. So patience, the only way we're going to understand patience is by understanding what aversion is, which is anger. And the only way we can understand aversion and anger is by understanding attachment, because there's this intimate relationship. Like I've been talking, the Buddha's view is they've got these three poisons. Buddha talks about the three poisons, this cute phrase, the three toxic emotions. And on the face of it, it seems quite simplistic almost, First of all, the root one is this deepest misconception. We won't even go there. The deepest misconception deep in the bones of our being and at the level of assumption of a concrete, solid, separate, bereft, lonely, fear-based me. Forget that one. On the basis of that, we have attachment to get what that fantasy I wants. And this kind of drives most of what we do. And then when it doesn't get what it wants, which is 1,000 times a day, there's the panic attack of aversion. So there's a volatile levels called anger, the milder levels called irritated, annoyed, frustrated, upset, and the build-up becomes internalized and eventually is despair and depression. So patience is, instead of, see, what attachment is this emotional hunger to get just the nice things. All it wants is the nice things. All it wants is the nice things. This drives us. It's so primordial. Lama Yeshe said, I can tell you about attachment for one whole year. You'll never begin to understand it until we start going deep inside, So attachment is this emotional hunger that always wants everything to be lovely. It's utterly spontaneous. No one chooses it. It's just totally programmed. We come born with it because of past practice, Buddha says. So then the second it doesn't get what it wants, which is 1,000 times a day, the tiniest thing can be not what we want. You don't want the red light, you want the green light. You don't want the carrot cake, you want chocolate cake. You want the cups to stay nicely on the sink and not to fall on the floor. Baby events that we don't even pay attention to. Every time attachment doesn't get what it wanted, the panic attack of aversion arises. So patience is the moment you catch when attachment doesn't get what it wants. Like I've never yet met a person who, when they're washing the dishes, break a cup, who doesn't get upset. No one, I've never met a person who says, oh, that's okay, break another cup, Robina, it's cool, darling, we can buy another cup. Nobody says that. We get upset. You shouldn't break a cup. You hear mummy, you've internalized mummy when you're a little girl, you shouldn't break cups. You're not allowed to, oh, I broke a cup. Then guilt arises. It's the tiniest event you could ever imagine. It's like a joke to talk about it. But we have 1,000 of those events a day. And because nothing goes astray, everything gets stored in the mind. So then it builds up. And then by the end of the night, there's the straw that breaks the camel's back. This is how it works, But we don't pay attention until it's serious. That's the problem we have. So we make it 10 times harder for ourselves to handle our mind when we're completely berserk. So patience is the exact opposite of aversion. Aversion is this instinctive pushing something away. Attachment is this instinctive, oh, that's delicious, and you go towards it. And it's instinctive, primordial. And then aversion is the instantaneous second the wrong thing arises in front of you, the wrong smell, the wrong taste, the wrong words, the wrong sound, the wrong this, the wrong that, based on this programming of what we think attachment wants. That's aversion, which is the basis of anger. So then patience is grabbing that moment and greeting the red light. That's cool, I can handle a red light. That's cool, break another cup. Right that second, that approach counteracts the aversion. It's so simple, it's embarrassing, but we have to wait until we can't handle anything before we go to the therapist. Then it's just too difficult. So you've got to start with the small things. This sounds kind of irrelevant. It sounds so silly talking about breaking a cup. Like, don't be so pathetic, Robina. But they're the baby events that then are what attachment doesn't want, which brings the baby events of aversion: irritated, annoyed, frustrated. They're called aversion. They're called anger. They're mild anger. And everything gets stored in your mind. So it builds up. The whole life, we're building up stuff. And if we don't pay attention to it and deal with it then it builds up. And you're going to have the straw that breaks the camel's back. It's so logical. So forget about getting single point of concentration, forgetting about getting great realizations, forget about realizing emptiness, forgetting about getting shamatha. Just thinking that every day, learning to be conscious of the response to whatever goes on outside, which is the job. There's always a response in the mind. Something triggers. You know, the red light triggers a response. The green light triggers a response. Breaking the cup triggers a response. Getting the nice cake triggers a response. Our responsibility is the response. Our responsibility is what goes on in the mind. The thing out there is merely a catalyst that triggers something in the mind. And the job we have to learn to do is recognize exactly what it is in the mind each moment. Is it anger? Is it jealousy? Is it kindness? Is it patience? Is it love? They've got names. They're all concepts. We call them emotions because the body's involved. But all an emotion is a build-up of that habit, of that thought. So like in my life, anger was a strong habit. So my mind was programmed with aversion whenever my attachment didn't get what it wanted. I was very good at anger. Mum didn't have to teach me. So then I didn't have mild anger, I had explosive anger. So that's what we call an emotion. You'd see me shouting, you'd hear me shouting, you'd see the spit coming out of me, you'd see me stamping and stomping and screaming, oh, Robina's angry. It's because you saw the body shouting and yelling. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. That's just the expression of what's going on in the mind. And that's why it's harder for people like you, let's say if you're patient and you're a quiet person. Not patient actually, no, quiet. You don't vomit. You don't express your anger. But it's still in there. You have the same response. I mean, this is why I always like to use the example of really trying to prove to us that anger, because we're so addicted to the body, we make the body the boss, as Lama Yeshe puts. We're so addicted to our body, and therefore the sensory experiences. So we don't pay attention, because we don't pay attention to the thoughts deeper down that are informing our emotions. We only see it when it gets to the level of emotion. That's always the analogy I use. You've never heard of mechanics. And you wait till your wheel is falling off at 120 miles an hour on the freeway. And you only now discover your wheels are not working well because you've never paid attention to when they started to wobble. So we've got to start paying attention to the wheels wobbling. Then we can handle, then your wheels will never fall off. That's the thing I'm getting to. If we can even begin to get some semblance of control, of awareness every day of what's happening in our mind before it gets to the level of emotion. This is the skill we can learn. Then we will not ever get to the point where we go mad and can't handle things. This is a fact. It's hard work. It's possible. So this, so talking about patience is this massively powerful, brave, courageous attitude that welcomes, not resists the problem. So don't wait till you've been accused of murder and have to be put on death row when you're still innocent. Don't wait till then to practice patience. Don't think of it as passive aggression. That's disgusting. Don't think of it as passivity. That's wrong too. It's a very proactive state of mind, very courageous state of mind, where, because attachment is this primordial junkie that only wants the nice things, and aversion is a junkie that's been thwarted. And it can't stand the problem. So we've got to reverse that and welcome the problem. And the second you welcome, like in other words, there's the cup falling down from the dish rack. And the usual response, oh shit, you'll say, I broke a cup, and you're looking around to see who saw you. I mean, I'm seriously talking about a baby event. We think it's nothing, but it's a symptom. So that the second the cup is falling, you're already panicking. The aversion is arising. Oh my God, I broke a cup, You're checking who said you shouldn't and you're naughty. It all happens so quickly. So the second, what patience means is you reinterpreting the event. You're seeing it as not so bad. You're actually seeing it as good. It's okay, I broke a cup. And whereas we tend to say you shouldn't break a cup. That's called anger. You are breaking a cup. It's happening, it's real. You learn from it, especially if it's your $1,000 grandma's cup. You didn't want to learn you broke a $1,000 cup. I agree, nothing wrong. Learn from it. But meanwhile, greet it. Greet it. instead of pushing it away. That's patience. It's huge mind. It's a hugely brave attitude, because 1,000 times a day we will have aversion to some little baby event. And we don't pay attention. We just call it annoyed, irritated, frustrated, but that's mild anger. And the Buddhist view is about the mind. There's two things. There's a kind of qualitative process of creating karma, the type of act, how we respond, the label we give to the name, the thought, the feeling, the emotion. Then there's just the bare bones process. As one Lama said, it's like we're shooting a movie all day. Every single tiny thing we experience through our senses or in our mental consciousness, it's leaving an imprint. It's like he says, you're shooting a movie all day, everything's stored in your mind merely as memories. So nothing goes astray, which is so things build up, you know. And so the second you grab that event and relabel it from this is bad to, okay, I've done it. Let's, you know, it's the way it is. It's okay. It's only a cup. That second, that reinterpretation, that's what patience is, you know. So suddenly it won't leave this kind of build up of frustration. This is the thing. I mean, it sounds so simple, but this is we have to practice it every single day. Practice. And that means we've got to be seeing our mind, hearing the thoughts, labeling them accurately, identifying which thought it is. Is it attachment? Is it love? Is it kindness? Is it jealousy? Is it anxiety? But when we only leave it to the level of the physical body, it's kind of a bit late, you know. I mean, we can learn from it, but we've got to go deep down to get to the thought that's informing the experience, you know. Brian's got his hand up. What do you want to say, Brian? Talk to me, darling.
Hello, Venerable. Nice to see you. I just want to share something because this topic is incredible that you're talking about this today. You know, we've spoken, and you know I'm a flight attendant, and I'm here in Honolulu right now, which is wonderful. It's wonderful. I'm thankful that I'm being paid to be here.
That's right.
You know, in the last year, what we've had to deal with in our industry has been, in 37 years, I have never seen human beings behaving in such a way.
Oh, is that true? Has it really been difficult? Is it? Tell us about it. Tell us.
Yesterday, we had 4 incidents.
In the plane.
Before we even left for Hawaii, we had a couple of people removed by the LAPD. A lot of the issues we're having with masks, but at the same time, the fares are the cheapest they've been in 20 years. So we're getting a whole different type of person traveling. You know, my anger went from 0 to 100, just like that.
My God.
But I don't want to, I can't vomit everything out.
You can't.
So this morning I did my practice, I meditated just to kind of, but I find I still feel it here. I mean, it's a lot to deal with, and you know that they're all human beings, and we want everyone's going about their life trying to be happy. But sometimes this is, and it's a work in progress, like you said, it's a working hypothesis. But it's interesting that I try and stop the thoughts before the physical reaction, but this was so overwhelming.
What kind of events happen? I mean, we don't know. So necessarily, you tell us what events, what kind of happened?
So we had 2 passengers got into a fight over a seat.
About what though?
About a seat.
Oh, really? Okay.
2 passengers got into a fight. Then we had a couple of people that refused to wear their mask.
Okay.
And then the captain said, you know, it's a federal mandate now. If you're not going to wear it, you have to get off. They said to me, you need to get out of my space. So I just told the captain that. He had the cops come on, they were off. You know, and I'm not a confrontational person. You have to be very patient.
That's right.
And understanding in this job. And there are safety issues because at 30,000 feet, we don't want these kind of things happening. Then there was another incident where 2 people were getting into an argument, and we could hear like anti-Semitic things flying around. So we had to get them. I mean, you know, everyone's going on vacation to Honolulu. They should be happy.
Okay.
It's beautiful here, you know. So it was astounding because when you've been in an industry for so long, you think you've seen and heard everything. And when you see the way people are behaving, it's really shocking.
So tell us about what you feel you have to learn. So if we take, okay, let's just do the Buddhist analysis. It's a really good discussion because we've all got our own variations of these experiences in our lives, you know. So let's just take the Buddhist analysis. There's, you know, let's just assume, Brian, you're a regular person who's got attachment. And this attachment at the subtlest level, which is where we've all got it, we don't notice it at this level, is this assumption. Think about this. It's attachment is at the level of assumption. And the assumption is that Brian, and that you're like all of us, needs to get only the nice things. So every second, I mean, on one level, at a regular level, it's reasonable to want things to be nice. Think of it that way. That's a perfectly human thing to do. But the more we have this attachment that mixes with the regular, there's this kind of emotional need for everything to be nice, that's when the aversion arises. And the point is, Brian, you're nothing unusual. You're a normal human being like everybody in this room and everybody on the universe. So we're talking at quite a subtle level. So when we can start to recognize that emotional neediness for things to be lovely, because we're so fragile, we can see, I mean, how distressing it is and how it stresses you. And as you said, how you're feeling it still in a visceral level. That shows how primordial our neediness for everything to be lovely is. And then when you start seeing these people being ugly and gross and anti-Semitic or racist or whatever, it's so naked to see it in front of you. It's like a storm. You can't stand it. And that's when your aversion arises. So of course, for you can't afford to start joining in the fight because you'll be tucked out by the LAPD as well. So you know you've got to suppress. So that's when the tension for you between the need to have everything lovely, the neurotic part of you, the reasonable part of you, that's fine. And then the aversion, the panic when it starts to come. And then you can't see it properly. And that's what happens if your anger arises, you exaggerate their anger, and then the drama starts, you know. So all this is doing is showing how difficult this job is. Not your job, but the job of working on our mind. So then learn from it and just give yourself, luckily you've got the space. And we just keep seeing every day. You do a bit of practice, you aspire every day to see your mind. And slowly, when you look back, you say, wow, I'm making some progress. It's tiny incremental steps, you know. But the point is, it's good to see what the problem is out there. But then the real work is for Brian to see, well, there's the attachment, there's the aversion, this is mine, that's their action, and this is my part of it. That's the key part. Because what we tend to do is the more gross the people are on the plane, the more we feel justified to respond the way we do. But we can't be like that. We've got to learn. It's like you've learned from whatever it is in your mind, and then that'll keep improving, and you'll get better and better and more relaxed and more able to literally greet the problem, which means you'll see it more clearly and it won't freak you out. That's when eventually we get to the point where the aversion starts to become brave and courageous. You understand what I'm saying? So way to go, babe. I'm glad you got a day off. You get one day off or more than one?
No, I have the whole day here. I'm going to go for a walk along the beach and just let it go. I'm going to let it go.
Exactly. But learn about your mind. Learn about it, the intricacies of what's happening in your mind. Learn about the event, see it, and then learn about your response. That's the key job of being a practitioner. You understand, don't you? Yes. Well done, Brian. Good on you. Thank you for your good examples. My God. Okay. Who else, people? Who else is there? Has got their hand up? Ace. Yes, Ace. How can I help you? How happy to see you?
Hello, Robina.
Happy to see you, darling.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you well.
Yeah, thank you for your teaching.
Good.
You talk about attachment. I remember when I was a child, about 6 years old,
yes,
there was a neighbor, an older man, who were smiling at me. So I was so delighted by his smiling until the point that I began to see him in the dream.
Yes.
And when I was about 8 years old, I had the same experience with the teacher. I was thinking about him every second. I didn't understand why. But finally, I just knew that I had emotional craving for some people.
Yes, that's right. Exactly. The question is?
And these patterns continued until the adulthood.
Yes, exactly.
So the attachment.
So tell us the question. So turn it into a question, Ace. What's your question?
Yeah, so
you're describing it very clearly, this deep emotional hunger to be liked.
Yeah. And it caused me a lot of suffering.
Exactly, because then you start to fantasize about the people, then you try to manipulate to get them to like you more, and it can cause can't it? But you're learning about it now, aren't you?
So as defense mechanism, you know, I isolated myself to protect my feelings. that was the only way
I'm losing you,
to.
Ace. I'm losing you. So tell me, make it a question, Ace. It'll help if you make it a question. What's your
Yeah.
question?
So
Seeing it very
in
clearly.
practicing,
Yeah,
right, the bird has wisdom and compassion.
that's right.
So how can we use wisdom in practice to let go of this emotional hunger and
I
attachment?
understand, darling. It's a really subtle one you're describing, Ace. The attachment that you're describing is everybody's got it underneath. We've all got attachment to sex and drugs and rock and roll and money and all the gross, obvious sensory objects. But this attachment you're describing, this emotional neediness for people to smile at us, to like us, to approve of us, is very deep in all of us. So it's everybody's practice. So if the fact that you can see it is really good, Ace. And so as soon as you can see a problem, that's the beginning of the solving of the problem, isn't it? If you can recognize the problem, you're really going in the right track. So then you catch, and this is what practice is every day, Ace. I mean, it's like you just got to train yourself to have some kind of morning practice where you maybe, you do a meditation, you read something, you listen to the teachings, you hear it, you try to apply it. So then you get more and more conscious, Ace. So when you notice yourself doing this, you catch yourself and you go against it. That's what practice is, step by baby step, darling. It's an organic, incremental, gradual process. Wisdom is what you get when you unpack and unravel these delusions, and that's what you're gradually developing. So just keep moving one step at a time, Ace.
Thank you very much.
Good.
I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. It's really good to hear. Thank you so much that you could see it so nakedly. It's very powerful. And of course, it can become a huge problem, because then as soon as we hunger for the person to approve of us and they smile at us, and we make a big story about that person, as you said, think about them all the time. That's one of the symptoms of attachment, whether it's food or sex or approval. We think about the object, the person, the event, the thing all the time. That's the symptom of attachment. So it's marvelous that you're seeing it. So you have to learn to counteract that and see how it's a fantasy, how you exaggerate and embellish. You're seeing it. It's very good. So every day, one step at a time, Ace. Just keep working, keep practicing, keep doing it. You're doing great.
It was so overwhelming, because when I get what I want, so it seemed like a pleasure.
That's right.
But in the end, when the person is not here, the anger, jealousy,
right. Exactly.
sadness.
Exactly.
So,
you understand perfectly, Ace. Just keep practicing. Keep working.
Thank you very much.
Keep reading, thinking, analyzing it, and keep using it to see your mind. And you're doing beautifully. Keep moving, Ace.
Thank you very much, Robina. Appreciate it.
Thank you. What other questions are there? Any particular questions or points to bring up, people?
Maddie has a question.
Yeah, Maddie. Who is it? Who? Maddie. Maddie. Talk to me, darling.
Hello, Venerable Robina. Hi. I have a question about when we face persecution, is the best way to have patience for that to just walk away?
I think it's many scenarios. So you mean like as a race or as a religion or something, as a member of a race or religion that's being persecuted? Is that what you're saying? Or is
I can give one example in particular. Yeah. I went to Walmart the other day with my roommate, and a gentleman came up to my roommate and tried to tell him that he needs to repent and find God and not associate with me because of my transition.
Oh, I see. Okay. So then your friend was so you're asking, how would I deal with that? Is that what you're asking?
Yes. I mean, would I just walk away?
Okay, this is good. No, I think if, let's say, it's your sister, it depends on the relationship, Maddie. Let's say it's just, maybe if it's your sister who starts, whatever, it depends on your relationship. So we'll forget the sister one. It was a stranger, right? It was a stranger in a supermarket, wasn't it?
In this case, it was a stranger.
Okay, so in those cases, my sense is absolutely water off a duck's back. Let it go in one ear and let it go out the other ear. In other words, reinterpret it. In other words, I think it's different things, Maddie. If in the beginning, when let's say when you're just working on this transition and you're fairly fragile yourself, then it's quite hard to do this. But the more confident you are in the choices you are making, the more content you are about who you are, the more easy it is to have it be water off a duck's back. But if you're still fragile, then the thing is with a stranger, though, you can't afford to do anything. It's just a stranger. They're not going to touch you your life again. So this is where you've got to learn to be brave in the face of these things and do your best at least to shut your mouth. Maybe you go home and have a little weep. But as you get stronger and more content in who you are, then it will be easier and easier. But with a stranger, I think you got no choice. That's why with, we got no choice. But maybe if it's a friend and they love you and they want to know some things, you can afford to have a discussion, that's different. So each scenario, I think, is different. But that kind of one, I think there's no other choice because the person's ignorant, the person's so arrogant that they dare to walk into your relationship and start giving a lecture. I mean, that shows their arrogance is beyond belief. Their aversion, their anger is beyond belief. So then really, what can you do with that except completely just, in one ear and out the other?
Thank you.
There's no choice about that one. And the more you know yourself, if you started freaking out, then you're the one who's going to get blamed. You're the, oh, look at you, you pathetic person. And they're going to call the police on you, So the more you can at least show indifference on the outside, your heart's beating maybe, and come home and have a little weep, that's okay. But at least control your body and your speech so you don't get yourself into more trouble, and don't feed this person's neuroses. Don't feed them anything. You understand?
Thank you. I do.
I remember I was traveling all the time and I got taxis, and let's say I had a fanatic religious driver, whether they're Muslim or Christian, either way, it was either way. And they discovered I was a Buddhist, and they know that Buddhists don't talk about God. I got the same kind of lectures. I got, you're going to be burning in hell, unbelievable lectures. And I would just, oh, thank you so much. Please pray for me. I'm so sorry. And I'd completely turn it around and crack a joke about it. So there's nothing they can do to that. There's nothing they can go with there. As soon as I start arguing, then it's fuel, So it was nothing to me. It was less than nothing, because I'm very content in being a Buddhist and let people think that. And I'd say, please do pray for me. Thank you. You're very kind. And what can they say about that,
Perfect. Thank you.
But you've got to feel content in yourself to do that. If you're still fragile, it's not that easy. So
I love it. Yeah.
Keep working on yourself. Keep being clear about what you're doing. Make your choices and be content with those.
Thank you. May I add on and ask about if it's somebody who is closer to me in my life?
Yeah, then you got to know how much they are. I mean, like, for example, okay, my family, for example, I've got 6 siblings, and none of them is Buddhist, none remotely Buddhist, all used to be Catholic, now not Catholic at all. Some even actively don't like their past religion. So we don't ever discuss it. I think I can count on one hand the questions directly they've asked me about Buddhism, so they don't ask and we don't talk. So we've made, a conscious decision between us, actually. I think it's an unconscious or an agreement that we don't talk about things we disagree with, and we don't discuss each other behind our backs. So there's enormous harmony between us, and that means we're able to find the common ground. But if a sister, even one sister, one time she was slightly drunk, so she started asking me questions, but I knew she wasn't really interested, so I'd cracked a joke. So even if someone does ask you, don't be so vulnerable and you suddenly blurt out all your feelings about it, because then maybe they're just being polite. So you've got to really know if they really do want to have a discussion, and then really know how much you let that person know. And I think when it comes to people who are a bit close, then maybe they'll stick their nose in where it doesn't belong. So I don't give any opportunity for fuel. I just leave it there and crack a joke about it, and then change the subject. So you've got to really know if the person is truly interested.
Good.
Or if the person is, and if they're really being mean, then it's the same kind of thing. You have to just keep distant. And if you can't handle it, you keep distant. Okay. I don't know. It's not easy with families. Families especially are pretty volatile,
Yes. Thank you so much, Venerable Robina.
Thank you, Maddie. Thank you, sweetheart. What else, people? Anything? But just patience. Thinking about patience is really intense. Like say. Like Brian's example, the volatility on airplanes with these small amount of people in this tiny space, anything could happen. We know with people's crazy minds exploding. So you have to be so courageous in that kind of job where you've got to be like a rock of Gibraltar. But the thing is, when we can see that if we can see ourselves responding and getting our heart beating faster, then that means anger is arising. And as soon as anger is arising, it's distorting it already, making it worse than it is. So in other words, the more you practice not welcoming it doesn't mean, oh, now keep fighting, I'm welcoming the fight. No, it means you're not resisting it. Resistance is what makes anger so fearful. And then it exaggerates it, makes it all worse. Then you get afraid, because all these delusions are rooted in fear. So if you're not afraid of it, then you see what's happening, but you're not afraid of it. So you can stay more stable and it won't freak you out. That's what we're trying to practice. You see what I'm saying, Brian? It's that's the learning. Remember the things all these people said, because it's shouting and it's reverberating in your head, but look into the mind, look into our neediness to have everything lovely, and look into our fear and panic when it doesn't happen, because that's what's underneath anger is fear, you know, your own aversion. So at least the first level, though, this is the same with Maddie. This is why they say the first level of practice is just work on your body and speech. Don't worry about your mind yet. Try and at least you have to behave impeccably, don't you, Brian? That's your job. You've got to behave impeccably. That means you have to train yourself to show the right face, to say the right words. Maybe your heart's beating, but you train yourself to say and do the right thing. That's really important. And then when you get home, you can work out what's going on in the mind. But at that time, it's your body and speech. You've got to keep those completely under control and say the right words. At the same time, you know, even though these two maniacs doing what they're doing, you can still have empathy, because you can see that that's their anger, that's their attachment not getting what it wants. I understand how they feel, and that's their anger, which is their panic when their attachment doesn't get what it wants. So when you've got this clarity, you can empathize. When you see your attachment and your aversion, you can empathize with theirs. But having empathy doesn't mean you become soft. You can still be firm. You understand what I'm saying? So the real one to see is with attachment, aversion, jealousy, all of them, they're driven by fear. And so they're not clear. They make us fragile. So the more we can have clarity, the more we can have patience and clarity, and then the less fear we have, and the more clearly you can see what's going on, and the more effective you can be. Do you understand what I'm saying, Brian? Everybody. This is not an easy job, you know. This is really tough, but this is the job we all have to learn. Day after day after day. This is real practice. This is what practice really is, you know. And the other one is not to defend our right to be angry. We do that. Well, I mean, look how bad it was yesterday, Brian could say to himself. Look at these terrible people. I'm allowed to be angry. I'm allowed to be distressed. Don't ever talk that way to ourselves. That's just kind of getting ourselves off the hook. Well, of course, we're allowed, but we're trying to change our mind so you can become strong and clear, and you can do a hard day's work for American Airlines and come home and have a happy mind. That's your goal, you know. And that's where we can learn from trauma. We can learn from the suffering in life. We can learn from it. We can learn from it and get braver and braver. That's the job, I think. That's the way of saying it. I don't know. What do you think, people? Any questions? 1:45.
Hi, Robina.
Hello, who's that?
It's Kim.
Hello, Kim. How are you, sweetheart? Talk to me.
I'm good. I
Good.
just really related to what you said about getting braver and braver when dealing with trauma or with our trauma. And I don't have anything big to report here, but I have found that practice, in particular with aversion.
Yes.
And for me, I feel like irritation is like low-level hatred, kind of.
Right, exactly, precisely. It is that. Exactly right. Exactly right.
Anyway, I don't know where everybody else is at, but I just feel like recently a lot of trauma that was repetitively going through my mind.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that, darling?
So I got injured. I got a couple of spinal cord injuries, and I had a really rare injury. And so I kept going to the hospital. I was near death, and they thought I was making it up.
Oh my God.
It was like a nightmare. And I got flown out. Sold our house, flew out, and I was at Johns Hopkins, and the doctor was surprised I was still alive.
Yeah.
So just like, you know, there's some trauma there, and there's some people don't like you feeling, and it's all of those things, all of those vulnerabilities really came up.
Mm-hmm.
I've been trying to heal psychologically, emotionally. I mean, my body will do what it does, but
Darling, what did you say?
My body will do what it does. It'll take care of itself in terms of healing, I'm sure. But I just really found repeating the practices that you're teaching and getting some clarity on karma and how it's ripening is my karma, my negative emotions and my feelings, and that it actually might not have anything to do with those doctors. And I know that sounds kind of strange, but it just wrapped itself up.
I think the way to think about it, sometimes one approach is like this. So, you know, if we're really trying to work on our mind, so in Brian's case, for example, It was the particular events that, this is the way to say it. Your event is this business with the doctors and the pain. Maddie's event is with this guy in Walmart. Brian's event is the crazy people on the American Airlines flight to Honolulu. Each of us can point to the different event. So that's where the things are different, but the same practice for each one of us. Each one of us has this emotional hunger for everything to be lovely. You had the craving to have people believe your words. Maddie has the craving to be approved of and loved. Brian has the craving for every passenger to be gorgeous and like Pollyanna. We all like that. We all have this instinctive craving for things to be nice. And then the second you got your event, the doctors didn't believe you. Maddie had her event, this rude person sticking his nose in where it doesn't belong and giving a lecture. Brian's event of these crazy maniacs fighting each other. Each of those events are different, but they trigger the same things in each one of us, which is the panic attack of attachment not getting what it wants. So we can do the internal job, and then of course we want to add the karmic one to it. Why is it happening? Then these are the tools we use to interpret not the event but ourselves, because that's the job to be done. The internal job is the one to be done. Are we communicating, people? And this is a tough one, because the external events are so vivid, are so powerful that, this is where the natural response for all of us. Why are you upset, Brian? Well, I had all these ugly people on my flight today. Why are you upset, Maddie? Well, this rude guy came along and started giving lectures. Why are you upset, Kim? Because these doctors don't believe me. So you analyze what I'm saying. It seems sort of shocking to even argue with that response. Well, of course you're upset. Two people fought each other. Of course you're upset. Someone was rude. But we've got to go past that and not and start to see, yeah, that's true. External events are powerful, but the external event is merely the catalyst for me to see my mind. It's very powerful, and it's very grown up, and it's makes us very accountable. It's not blame. It's not guilt. It's a very powerful way to learn every second. In other words, it's like we're all playing tennis. And so each of us has got this maniac tennis player chucking balls at us in the most awful way. And the victim in us is saying, how dare you hit balls at me like that? And you complain about this dreadful Federer chucking balls at you and defeating you. But the brave attitude is, what can I learn from this tennis player? What can I learn from these balls being thrown at me? And I'm going to improve my own tennis. You get my point, people? And that's what internal work is. By working on your attachment and your anger and your jealousy, you're improving your tennis. So no matter what people throw at you, you can handle it. You've got the tools. That's what practice is. Are we communicating, people? It's intense and very personal and very internal and very courageous. But this is the Buddha's whole entire point. We can mold our mind. We can change our mind. As Lama Zopa says, we can mold our mind into any shape we like. So it's in other words, to be that tennis player with this wretched Federer being mean and ugly, chucking all these balls at you, the victim wants to burst into tears and say, stop doing that. Do you understand what I'm saying here? But when we become brave and we're learning to see our own inability to handle these strokes coming at us and these balls, that's what practice is. That's practice. You make your own tennis better and better, and then eventually you can handle any player. You can handle any event. Are we communicating, people? This is this is what real practice is. And this is tough. It's not guilt. It's not blame. It's accountability and courage, because we can. That's why I always use examples of these nightmarish environments for my friends in prison who are completely innocent. I mean, talk about these nightmarish environments where you've been accused of murder and you didn't murder anybody. And it's easy to go completely insane. But the people I know truly working on this and changing their minds, dealing with these outrageous things being thrown at them, this is the key to success. As they say, there's a saying, if you can change something, if Brian could have got those two people to behave nicely in 1 minute, hey, Brian, go for it. If you can get that person to behave better, Maddie, if you can get those doctors to believe you instantly, go for it. But what if we can't change it? That's where the work starts. This is the key to success. It's intense. But we're so used to hearing it as kind of like, oh, you mean I'm the blame? I should change? I'm allowed to be angry. No, that's how we tend to feel. I'm allowed to get upset with Federer playing all those old horrible balls at me. No, you are allowed to, but it's not going to help you much. You've got to learn to play tennis. This is a good analogy, I think. And this is one of a tennis. There's this Australian tennis player. I mean, I love the man. I shouldn't be rude about him. A Greek Australian boy. Actually, more than he's Greek and Thai or something. I can't remember. But he's a genius player. But he's emotionally like 5 years old. It seems he gets angry, upset, jealous, resentful. He has tantrums. So he's never going to get. You can see he's never going to get anywhere because he doesn't know how to control his mind. That's exactly a good example. You know, he gets upset and he has tantrums and he blames and throws things at people. And 1 minute he's beating Federer, the next minute he's having a tantrum because he can't control his mind because he wants everybody to play the tennis that he wants them to play. That's how ego is. We want everybody to behave the way we want them to behave. Do you understand, people? That's how attachment works. It's very powerful. Yes, India. And yes, Louis. And yes, Ace. Talk to me, one of you. Louis or Lewis, you talk to me.
What if the attachment is to something internal? Like when I see something sad, I get this overwhelming feeling of sadness. It just goes right through my body, and I know what's causing it. I know what the attachment is. It's to a past event that happened when I was a child.
Yeah.
And I let this outside sadness come into me, and it like it feeds it, and then it just goes away.
But it seems to me
Is
also.
that wrong?
I'm not sure, Lewis. I'm Louis or Lewis. Are you Lewis or Lewis?
It's Lou, actually.
Lou, okay, Lou. So my
Yeah.
feeling is, Lou, there's also compassion in there. Don't sort of. I think there's a mixture of things. If you've got some empathy, and whether you had a childhood something, it doesn't matter. But it triggers some compassion in you. But if it's mixed with attachment, then it becomes all sentimental and sort of soupy and dramatic. So compassion, nothing wrong with empathy. Nothing wrong with empathy, Lou. I wouldn't criticize that. That's marvelous. You've got empathy. Don't chuck that part out. But our empathy often is mixed with attachment and emotional memories and things. That's the part we've got to get rid of. Just keep the compassion. That's fantastic. Nothing wrong with that.
But is it wrong that it's always the same event that comes up? It's like it's not enough that I feel compassion. I have to drag up this event.
That triggers that memory, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you just got to try to. I know this is because the memories in our mind are very strong, aren't they? I mean, but if it comes up, then try and just dismiss it again. Because I understand that point. It's an interesting point, isn't it? But it's not so relevant. Just try and just not pay attention to it, I think. Don't make more than it. Don't go on about it, in other words, in your mind. Just sort of let it go. Because things do trigger. And I mean, it's very true, isn't it? Certain music, for example. I mean, music that I listened to when I was 22, suddenly hearing it again can trigger that feeling of that moment. But we shouldn't go on about it too much because it's all past, it's gone. But keep on the compassion part. Nothing wrong with that. You understand, Lou? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, India.
Hi, Venerable Robina. Thank you for doing this series. I'm really enjoying it.
Good.
I was just wondering, are there any techniques for maybe kind of releasing the pain from past offenses, let's say?
You mean things you've done that are naughty?
No, just say somebody else hurt you.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Given them in your mind, you wish them well, you ask the Buddhas to bless them, but there's still that residual pain.
Of course, sweetheart. No, it's very deep, isn't it? No, you see, this is because everything is stored there as memories, like, Lou was saying. So I think it's different approaches because it does feel very emotional. But I think the real thing to try, if we can get beneath the emotional component and get to remember that it's basically anger. It's basically anger. I mean, when people hurt us, we call it, I'm feeling very hurt. But it's our attachment has been offended and we have this aversion to it. Not to criticize ourselves, it's just what it's called. But so it's like aversion. And I mean, especially if it's a person who's close to us, then they come around and abuse us. It's very, very painful because we had all this neediness and expectation and we put our heart into this person's life and we relied upon them and trusted them and suddenly they abuse us. It can be very shocking. It's true. So I think every time it arises, all the things that you're saying are correct. The loving one, the compassionate one, but also just to notice that it's basically again this aversion in the mind. It's aversion. You want to push it away. This is awful. So we have to learn to greet it That's what there's different approaches: being kind, understanding their humanity, forgiving them. But the deepest one, the hardest one to go, is this aversion to it, the pain that arises when you remember it. That's basically trying to think of it as aversion. So then there's a multitude of ways. I mean, if you have the view of karma, you can apply that. If you can apply the one of kindness, of understanding where they're coming from, there's a multitude of approaches, but it takes time to chip away at it. Don't expect it never to come again. And if we can remember it, then try and that's an example of the aversion arising, and just practice the best we can. And slowly, as we practice, we will heal it. And then eventually, when you can learn to even, when you learn to first heal the hurt yourself, then you can learn to really have forgiveness. Like that comes later, I think. You can't have real compassion for somebody else until you've really got compassion for yourself. When you forget, you kind of, but also maybe is in this example that you're giving, is residual kind of guilt about your own role in this, or that you feel like you were responsible or something, or it's not like that? I'm just curious.
No, not like that.
Not like that. Okay. No, I think the one of being able to forgive the other person is the biggest one, but that's got to come after we've done the internal work on our own stuff. Because often mixed with that anger and hurt is guilt. But if it's not guilt there, then, it's like, well, okay, forgiving somebody for the harm they've done. I think of something like my father, for example. He did certain things that were really harmful. Right now, once I've done the work, I think part of my process is remembering his good qualities, remembering all the good things that he did, not just remembering the bad thing, because bad things loom large in our mind. So if this person is close to you, if you can try and think of all the good things they've done, if you're able to do that, then you start to paint a new picture of this person. And then with my father, for example, I start to see his qualities, but I also start to see his failings and his sad part, and and his own suffering. Because if you did not suffer, if anybody didn't have attachment and didn't have anger and didn't have jealousy, they wouldn't harm anybody. So if anybody does harm us, it's because of their own garbage. So when I can see that in my father, that gives me space to understand him and to forgive him. So when I think of him again, it's a different feeling. It's a different story that comes up, not the hurt anymore. So it's a slow process, darling.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much. Anybody else? Ace has a question. What's your question, Ace?
Yeah, so is that okay to grieve during meditation?
Sorry, what, dear? What?
Is that okay to grieve
during
what? Meditation? What do you mean to cry. That? Sometimes, I'm practicing meditation every day for 20 minutes. Sometimes I grieve, I cry when the thought pops up.
Nothing wrong. It's okay. Really important, though, not to get carried away with the emotional kind of self-pity of it. When we have emotions and feel sad or angry or hurt or jealous, we can get very self-piteous. So don't swim in it as self-pity. Have the tears and then let it go. Yes, it can be very cathartic. But don't get carried away and all self-conscious about it. Do you understand, Ace?
Yeah. So I will.
Yes.
I will not give my attention to this kind of thoughts, right?
That's right. Exactly. Let it come. It's good to have it and then let it go and just finish it. Exactly. That's good. Nothing wrong with that.
Thank you very much.
Good, Ace. What else, people? It's all because, my God, it's 6 o'clock already. My 6 o'clock. Whatever time you are in your part of the world, I don't know. But time to go. Gone like a dream. I hope there's been useful thoughts. Any thoughts we've had that have been useful, any seeds we've planted, we think how marvelous. We're going to keep on practicing, nourishing these seeds so we can develop our amazing potential for clarity and courage in the face of dramas, so that eventually it really is water off a duck's back and the basis of compassion. So, as Brian gets more and more advanced in his practice, when he's watching these two people, when he's really stable in himself, all he will have is compassion for these two berserk people, only compassion. So that comes when we've fixed our own stuff, So slowly we move towards that. And then he's totally capable of handling them if he has to, So keep working on the wisdom wing, which is healing ourselves, making ourselves stronger. Then we can do the compassion wing. And whatever, not sentimental. We think of compassion as all kind of soft and weak. Not at all. When we got wisdom, it brings iron to our compassion. Strength, courage, That's all. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you, darlings. Much love, everybody. Thank you so much.